students, I mean, you have, I think, seen this. As architects, what do you think would be our role when we are looking at soil as one of those aspects when we think about architecture? I'm sure because we have architecture students, so I would like to hear your opinion on how really we look at this and what is our role in this whole debate on soil conservation.
Yeah, so the first thing as architects we could do is while building, we take out lot of soil. So one thing we could do is conserve that and use it in the vegetation again. That is one way of looking at it. And also, if we are not able to conserve it, make the pavement or something permeable so that the water or the soil is reserved there and it's used again. And main thing is don't waste the topsoil. At least of starting 4 mm, leave it aside or make a sediment tank and save it for later and use it again on the site. That is one way of looking at it. So, or 50% of the site should be left untouched. And the contours as well.
As she said about conserving the soil, we can do that. And also we take out a lot of stones that we get, architectural lands. They take out the stones and they sell it in the market. So what can be done for that stones, and also the soil that they have on the surface, that can be reserved. And for vegetation they can be used. We can plant more trees, as it was said in the video, to cover the soil, to protect it and to nurture it. So we can use the soil again.
Yes, to cover the soil, firstly, when we build, we have to remove the soil firstly. So how we deal with that soil is of great importance, and also in planning, we have to leave certain areas open. There's a reason why we have to keep that plot, that percentage open as an open space for landscaping and all. But we don't really look at it in that seriousness, so as to what we actually do with that place. We even have the open plots in our DPs and all. But are those plots being utilized in a way where we are having enough vegetation there, landscaping there? And are we saving that area as the connection with nature, which in this urban development entirely, are we having that connect and the awareness to keep it as natural as possible, keeping it untouched, but yes, helping it again?
Another way that architects could use or preserve the soil was having strategies that include green roofs to the buildings, where they have another layer of soil. So the percentage of the land that we are utilizing in making the building footprint could again be transferred to another level or on the green roof. That would also help in reducing the temperatures of the building itself. So such kind of sustainable strategies could also be implemented, and awareness of such would also help in
basically what Anuja mentioned, that mostly when we design, we usually tend to leave the unbuilt as is. Instead, the unbuilt and the built should be designed together as a continuous thing. So in that way, we are also looking at soil while we are designing the unbuilt. And then again, as Shruti mentioned, how to make the building more sustainable. So I think these two are the ways where we actually look at soil while designing.
I would like to add that we need to provide for spaces where we can do things like organic waste management, composting. So that is one way of adding value to the soil. Since we are not left with much of open spaces, and the commercial aspects are such that you are not really left with many open spaces where you can do the plantation, and you have to deal with the parking arrangements and everything. So as rightly mentioned, the roof terraces can be used for plantation. And I mean, there are incentives from authorities, but that needs to be taken further by, encouraging people to take care of their own organic waste. That way, you can do the value addition to the soil itself, and the load on waste management is reduced, then landfill pollution is reduced. So that is one aspect I think all urban cities should take really very seriously. Thank you.
Also, I forgot to mention that the time of construction. The time of construction can be during the dry seasons, and even if it is during the wet season, we should create slopes for the water to run off. And before construction, we have to install the runoff elements, and also the signages should be put that there should be no spill-offs like waste, paints, or anything on the site or the soil directly. There should be proper waste segregation or collection on the construction site, and there should be sediment tank installation, and contour in the contour sites there should be trenches like channels and ridges created for the water to run off.
Thank you so much. So it's very interesting to hear that. I mean, especially I'm really, really heartened to hear that the fourth year students also have thought about this, because generally, I mean, with the masters we are doing this, so it's inevitable that they should know about it. But it's very nice to know that even at the fourth year and third year level, I think it's time now that we really think about all these things, however small they are, because in the larger context, they really play a big role. So coming a little towards the little larger thing that Karve ma'am had started off with, we talked about climate change and urbanization. I think as designers, as architects, as urban planners, it's a very, very important thing to really think about. So before I just go to the students, I would like ma'am to just throw a little more light on this, since she's been working on this climate change issue for a long time.
Thank you, Sujata. I would also like to add a few things on the soil discussion that was happening from a scientific perspective. We have to realize that while the topsoil is where we grow our food, there is about a few kilometers of rock under that. And constantly new soil is being produced from those rocks, and it is coming up. So it's not that the soil is not under threat in that sense. What is, however, happening is the rate at which new soil keeps coming up is the natural process, and we are using the topsoil for a variety of things at a much faster rate. That mismatch is what is causing this problem. So it's important to realize that there is no that much of a harm in using the topsoil for a variety of things. What a couple of you talked about is what is called as permaculture, where you sort of integrate your architectural design with the landscape. And rather than thinking of built area and unbuilt area separately, design the whole area in such a way that if you are using the land surface to do something which is unproductive, like living in that building, you should use maybe the rooftops or some spaces to compensate for that, so that the whole idea of the microbial world in the soil and the plant growth happening from that, and the insect world dependent on that, all of us sort of live in an integrated manner. So that is the direction in which we need to start moving. It was mentioned in my introduction that I teach a course which is related to history of the universe. That is exactly what we try to do. What often happens is we tend to look at these problems in compartmentalized way. We need to understand that our existence on planet Earth is linked with the microbes. We are the descendants of the single cell organisms which first originated on the planet. Our history on planet Earth has to be seen in the context of how geologically the planetary systems have evolved on Earth. So human history in the context of the history of planet Earth and the solar system, and the history of the solar system in the context of the history of the universe. then you start seeing connections, and you will realize that no problem can be seen and solved in isolation. All the systems are related. Sometimes solutions of one problem will trigger some other problem if you are not looking at the holistic picture. Climate change is actually a multi-dimensional problem. And when it comes to climate change and urbanization, there is a historical linkage between them, and there is a present day linkage, and there is a future linkage. We all know that climate change was triggered when we started using fossil fuels in large quantities, and that process was triggered after industrialization. Industrialization also triggered urbanization. So in that sense, urbanization and climate change are sister processes. When we think about cities today and we look at the greenhouse gas emissions coming across the world, the urban centers are the places where the emissions are concentrated, because this is where most of the energy is being used. And even today, whether it is electricity or mobility or cooking or any other thermal energy, we are heavily reliant still on fossil fuels. And it is the cities where energy gets used most, and therefore cities are the contributors to emissions. To some extent, some of these emissions are inevitable because of the way the cities are designed. Because we live in one location and work at a distance, we have to travel, and therefore vehicles have to be used, and therefore emissions happen. There is now this concept called a 15-minute city, where you can have, you can design in such a way that a person can reach wherever he or she needs to be in 15 minutes walking or cycling. And with that, we can reduce our dependence on automobiles and therefore energy consumption. So that's just one example of how change in the planning process at the city level can lead to reduction in emissions. Infrastructure is densely constructed in cities. You are concretizing everywhere nowadays. That is harming the soil also, in fact. We have in Pune now this big riverfront project coming up, which is going to concretize a lot of the river banks. And although it is designed by the most influential architect today, I am still going to say this in this architectural college, that that's the bad architectural design from environment and climate change perspective. So leave the areas which don't need to be concretized without concrete, because cement and steel are the most energy intensive materials that we use today. So minimalistic design is something that you have to think about. And also there is an idea of sequestration. We now, with the new IPCC report, we have to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So how can we create a building which is able to remove greenhouse gases? Some of these technologies are still on paper, but you can explore options and see whether you can use materials which are capable of absorbing carbon dioxide, for example, and then use that for maybe growing plants. There are some of these ideas that are floating around. Another angle of urbanization and climate change is that we have now already started seeing impacts of climate change. And again, cities are where the impacts will be maximum, because population density is high, infrastructure density is high. So if a disaster happens, then maximum damage is also going to happen there. And urban poor are going to suffer the most in the process. So in the urban planning, in designing and building infrastructure, we also have to think about how do we create a city which is just and equitable for all its residents. And we do not harm the future of one section of the society while creating amenities for other section of the society. So there are a wide variety of considerations that have to now come into architectural practices because of this new normal of a climate changed world that we are going to live in. And the increasing temperatures, how do we handle that through architectural design with minimum energy use, that in itself is going to be one big challenge for all of you. So I think I'll stop here for now.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So I think ma'am has kind of opened up plethora of things in front of us. I mean, as architects, that we can think about. So we are talking about equity on one side, and we're talking about equitable distribution and opportunities for all. To things like absolutely heat stress, especially in cities like ours in India, in a tropical country like ours, and then we have disasters and for all of this, I think city planning and urban planning is very, very important and responsible for all these things. So she also mentioned something about IPCC. So I would actually like to hear from our student panelists about what they know about IPCC and whether, and I would like to hear from you also, if you've heard about this, what do you know about this, and what is it that you know? So first we'll hear from them and then I'll come back to you also.
So it's an intergovernmental panel on climate change. The few cities, like few countries, have taken out the report. The IPCC have taken out the report on how the climate change is affecting and how it is going to affect in future. So right now it says that we have reached 1.5 degree warmer, and which is affecting most of the things. So in future, if it is going to increase, and how are we supposed to reduce it, they have given the adaptations and mitigation strategies related to that. So this is a broader perspective on IPCC.
Yes, IPCC. As much as I have an idea about it is there's this. So obviously there's this report which states in detail what is the current scenario, and it is very important for all of us to be aware of it. Yes, we did not have much of idea about it earlier, but there is this. We are ignorant about all these things. We all know there is climate change or it has adverse effects and all, but we are very unaware how we are going to deal with it. We all know that we have to, but the process where we start, we are just lost at that stage. How do we implement it, or how do we start with it? And also, it also states that the most vulnerable are going to be the people of nations who are not developed, and they are going to need support from the nations which are developed and know how to deal with it. So it is important for developing nations like us also to know how are we going to cope up with it. So even if 1 or 1.5 degrees Celsius, the warmer temperature is somewhere the limit, but it is that much also is not good for the environment, for us. And if it is right now 1 or 1.5 degree, it is definitely going to increase. So where do we just stop this? Like, reducing is another part, but maintaining this level, and to be at this level where we can actually improve, because later on, like now we have this narrow scope in upcoming years where we can actually do something about it, so that later on it's not a complete disaster where we just cannot go back to the stage where we were able to improve. So yes, so being aware, and students mostly having an idea about it is important.
So that's an important thing which I think Anuja mentioned, that awareness is where you really start taking action. So being aware about it itself is a big thing. So like I said, I'll come back to you as an audience. I don't want you to also be a very passive audience, because this is it's a debate, or it's a discussion, or even it's a topic, I think, which should touch, or which actually touches each one of us. Okay, not only as architects and designers, but as citizens. I'm sure all of you are facing the heat today, and you keep talking about it's so hot. So it's just one small thing that we are really now being aware of. Across the world, there are so many disasters which are really linked to climate change, which we are seeing today. But I think IPCC was one of the reports over a period of time which discussed this, talked about it at a higher level. now it is really coming down to the citizen level, I would say, where people are starting, create that awareness is being created. So I would like to know from you, have any of you heard about it, read about it? Do you know what it really talks about? I think some of the things these people have already spoken about. But generally, as citizens, as responsible citizens and responsible architects also, I would say, do you know anything? I would really like to hear from you also.
We need to think of many things when it comes to environment, because there are many things that we can do from the planning level to use of building material. So I just want to point out there is a need of building material research, because we use so many kind of artificial or man-made materials in building construction. So when it comes to using these type of materials, so there is a kind of a wide palette which is available, and even if we are using natural material, we are procuring it from the nature by harming the nature. So basically, we need to think of the more sustainable options, and there is a huge need of material research in architecture.
So as ma'am said about materials and sustainability, when we compare urban and rural, we go for vacations in villages, Kokanat jau, and so we go there for coolness and to relax. So I think that it also depends on the local materials. They usually use their local materials like mud, and they reuse it, hatched roof, and so I think that local material should also be used here. And also, my research topic was construction and demolition waste. When I did the survey, usually also there are a lot of traditional materials like steel bricks. They are just thrown on the discarded on the roads. Then why can't we use that? We can reuse it or recycle it, or we can also resell it if they are in good conditions. So that can be also a part of sustainability. And so the materials play a very important role. So yeah.
I would like to continue with the recycling part that she said. Yes, of course, using recycled materials is a very aware approach towards it. But again, recycling is also a process which needs energy. So it is also going to emit carbon, and it is also going to have its own impacts on the environment. And there is this, people refrain from using it because there is always this trial and error process when it comes to recycled materials. And while it is concrete and steel, we know because we have been seeing it being used for a long time now. And also these materials have higher taxes as compared to the materials that we use. So in that case, if a person is building his house or any construction is going on, first concern is yes, I want to build it with the most affordable thing that I can have. That is why I feel nobody really goes out of the way to use recycled materials and invest more in it. Nobody really looks at the bigger picture or the effect or uses and advantages that we will have over time. Also, there was this, I heard about a solar technique in which while constructing the building only you can have it completely based on solar energy. But at the installation process of it, it is going to require that big amount. And if that person is constructing at that stage, his first concern is, I want to build it first with this amount that I have. And then they are not ready to invest more in it. So yes, this thing is where we get a little stuck.
So yeah, that in continuation with that, that's where we come in picture. We give them awareness on operational costs. There's something called operational costs, which is going to reduce after the construction. So we give them the awareness that yes, you build now with this, the operational costs are going to reduce. After using the solar energy, yes, it is going to reduce in the later stage. And they are again giving back to the grid, the electricity. So yeah, that way.
So I always believe there's something called the hen or the egg, which comes first. So that's a big question, cost for a house and using environment-friendly materials to optimize your cost has been a debate that's been ongoing. Luckily, we are now reasonably sensitized to believe that investing into sustainable material is going to be cheap eventually. But that eventually is a question mark. So let me give you some examples of how this has taken a different turn. The Indian Green Building Council, realizing that unless you sort of incentivize sustainable construction, you will not get people to invest into these kind of practices and materials. And therefore, we got even Griha and IGBC rated projects do get an additional FSI if they are platinum, gold, silver. So I think platinum gets 7% more FSI. Now, therefore, this is one of the correct possible methods. I'm not saying the only method. The possible methods where people will now balance what they are going to spend additionally to give back to sustainable construction. So that's a very nice way on solving the egg and the hen problem. Okay, guys, you do sustainable constructions. You have solars, you have well-planned, whatever, all the MEP systems, etc., etc. And here you're going to get an additional FSI of 7% if you're going to get all your parameters right for the platinum rating. So this is one big thing that is happening. Second thing that somebody spoke about is materials. IGBC also has a rating system called Green Pro. So now people want to know. So we have fans that say they had 5-star rating. So what does that mean? Is the amount of energy that that fan will consume when it's operational. And therefore, if I am told that a fan which has a 5-star rating is slightly more expensive than something that is 1-star, which means that if it is a 5-star rating, in the long run, I shall save on my electricity costs. And these kind of ratings help us as citizens, so at least you are all architects, but look at a common general person, general consumer. He needs to understand why is he paying more, and why should I pay more for this fan when I can get a fan for $4,000 and something is going to cost me 5,000. So these rating systems which are certified. The fan is certified, saying that it's a 5-star rating, and therefore he is eventually convinced that okay, it might seem costly now, but in the long run, I shall be able to save money. You know, when we do solars, they talk of a 4 or 5 years of horizon to get your investments sort of done with. So these are kind of things that are working on a human psyche. All of us are fighting tight on budgets. All of us are wanting to do things that are cost effective. It's these things that help us look at things more in the more sustainable manner, and that's how I think it's a very first step that the government is taking. And I think it's a very good step, and let's see what we can do. So now what remains is the consumer should also start being aware, and that's where architects come into play. You guys are the ones who are going to say, okay, doesn't matter, it's going to cost you more, but then don't worry. This will be your payback periods. This will be the time in which you will be able to sustain it. So this is a good mix of how things are happening. And let's hope in the next few years, as I said, leave a legacy that we'll be proud of.
I want to go back to the IPCC point, which the students cleverly took in another direction. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is a group of scientists, and government officials are also in that group. So the report that comes out is something which everybody agrees on. And that's important to understand, because from time to time these people come out with status reports on climate change. These are watered down reports. That means what the report is actually saying is the minimum that everyone agrees on. The reality may be worse than that. And the current report which came out, the final part of it, installment of it, came out just last month. This watered down report is itself so scary. So the actual situation is likely to be far more scary. So at this point in time, the average temperature of the planet is 0.8 degrees centigrades more than what it used to be before the industrial era. If we reach 1.5 degrees centigrade, that's the limit beyond which the impacts will be so high that the entire social, economic, political system in which you hope to get your jobs and work will collapse. Okay, we haven't yet got to 1.5 degrees centigrade. We are at 0.8 degrees centigrade. However, the report is warning us now that our use of fossil fuels, which has been increasing every year, has to start dropping from 2025. If that doesn't happen, then we will reach that 1.5 degrees centigrade in 2030s. Okay, so understanding these reports and their implications is important for your survival as professionals and also as individuals. All right. So please do read up these reports and try to understand what they are talking about and what are the solutions that are being recommended. When it comes to, and I think that's a very important point, that construction materials, and especially can we find replacement for steel and cement, which are the most energy intensive industries, I mean materials to manufacture apart from fertilizers. So that has to be one area where a lot of research needs to be focused. But there is another aspect to it, which somehow I mean, of course, there are business pressures and all of that which also drive policies. Think about it that if today we are producing a certain amount of energy, if the energy consumption at household level goes down, then that much extra electricity becomes available to sell to industries. So it is actually in the interest of the electric distribution companies that household level electricity consumption should go down. So why don't they pay for the difference? Why should the consumer has to pay for the difference? It is both of them that are going to benefit. So the energy efficient appliances should be subsidized by electricity distribution companies, because they are going to ultimately have energy to sell without having to give it at a subsidized rate. So at least at the household level, the energy consumption can be brought down, and that economy of scale will bring the manufacturing cost also down, and that will make the appliance cheaper in the market. So somewhere that virtuous cycle has to be triggered, and policies can do that, because ultimately it is the overall population that is going to benefit, and therefore somebody like the government or the businesses which are going to directly benefit from these processes, they should be incentivized to take care of that difference in costs that exists right now, which is primarily because there is less demand for these products. So the cost is high because there is less demand, and because there is less demand, the cost remains high. So somewhere you have to break that with really science-based and bold policies, which unfortunately is not happening anywhere in the world. And that is something that we scientists keep on asking, that we should not leave things to the individuals. There is no point in guilt-tripping people that you are not buying eco-friendly products. The real change will come from policies, and that unfortunately is not happening. That is the real crux of the problem.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I think you might have realized that we talk about climate change and there are so many facets to it. Just, I think, one more thing we will take up. I think earlier ma'am talked about this 15-minute city. So similar to that, we are also now talking about carbon neutral cities. So I don't know how many of you are really aware about it. Any of you have heard about this? Something called as carbon neutral cities. Anybody in the audience? These are the concepts of the future, and these are things that you are going to be dealing with maybe in the next few years once you are out into the profession. So I'm just, just to create that awareness. Anybody? Any of you have heard about carbon neutral cities?
So is it the balance between the carbon emitted and used kind of circular economy, that we use it again, whatever we are emitting. So balance between the both and making it neutral. Yeah.
Any other take on this? Any
I
of you?
guess it is we need to reduce our emissions by using energy efficient equipments and relying more on natural resources and renewable energy resources. And of course, the main element is the carbon sequestration, which is increasing the green cover. So even our Prime Minister has made very ambitious announcements regarding increasing the green cover, and we really have to take that very seriously and take up that. I guess that is one hope that we have of increasing the carbon sequestration, which would help eventually to go to carbon neutrality. Thank you.
Well, many of you will be practicing in Pune and the surrounding region, I hope. There is a plan for Pune metropolitan region to go carbon neutral by 2030. And this plan has been put together by a number of us crazy people coming together and forming what we call Climate Collective Pune. Now we are struggling to get it through to the policymakers, but that's a different struggle. But the plan is definitely there, and it is doable. I mean, that's the main thing that we have been able to show, that it is possible to make Pune metropolitan region carbon neutral. Now, what carbon neutral means is, as correctly pointed out, you first reduce your emissions, and then still whatever that is left over, that you try to compensate for by increasing green cover, so that the net result is zero. Now, we all know that India has committed to go as a country carbon neutral by 2070, which is a bit too far ahead in future. For Pune, we decided let's try to at least take a shot at it to get it by 2030. There are many businesses which are also trying to go carbon neutral over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And architectural design in the city context will play an important role. Pune, as far as I know, was the first city where from among citizens this kind of a plan came up. Maharashtra government got inspired by that, and now we have a Mumbai climate action plan, where they are also trying to go carbon neutral and also to reduce climate vulnerability of Mumbai. Being a coastal city, it is far more vulnerable. In Pune also, we actually need the second piece, which is the how do we make Pune less climate vulnerable, which we are still working on. Many other cities have now started announcing that they want to go carbon neutral. So again, urban planners and architects will have a big role to play in that, because what you build today is like going to be there for the next few decades. So then those carbon emissions sort of get locked in once you build that particular infrastructure. So while constructing it itself, this thought process has to be there, that how do we provide maximum functionality with minimum use of materials and minimum use of energy. So that is the basic premise on which you will have to innovate and come up with new design ideas. Because ultimately that will be the key, because energy consumption you can reduce, we can go for renewable energy, even increasing green cover is also possible. But how do we reduce the emissions which are locked in by the infrastructure in the city? So that is where your role is going to be very, very important. And as I said earlier, even, I mean, forget about all the doing good for the planet, etc. Professionally, if this is the direction in which things are moving and thought processes are moving, then those who are able to design low carbon and climate aligned structures will definitely have an edge professionally. So it's from that practical consideration also, it's important to try and understand these issues.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I think you kind of summed up, which I was going to anyway ask them, that as architects, what is the role that we really have to play? So I think, like ma'am has said, that, every brick that we lay, okay, every material that we choose, every space that we are constructing, we do it, okay, we do it. We have so many considerations for it. There are functions to be considered, etc. But this added, I won't say now it has become an added layer, but something that should come right from the first. But it's an added layer that we really need to think about, that what are we building? How is it really going to affect our future in the coming years? Because the materials that we use, the way we build, okay, the equipment that we use, it's not only the materials, but the equipment that we use to build, all of it requires energy. All of it requires some amount of carbon emissions that go into our environment. So if we are, if we really need to go towards carbon neutrality, if we really need to go towards reducing to a certain extent, or trying to keep that balance of the environment and the climate and the temperatures, we definitely have a big role to play. And I think that is something that we have to realize. The sooner we realize, the faster and the better actions we will take when we are designing also. So I think that's a very important thought, and I think I'll just end with maybe some last words which Shroff sir would like to say.
I think I couldn't do better than what she's done, so I will let be that way. It's a wonderful thought that she said, you are the ones who are going to decide how things are going to happen. Please take cue. Please take her help. I'm there. If you want some commercial help, I'm good at that. What she's good at, she's super. So I'm so glad that I could attend this forum and look at things so differently and understand what you young children are looking at. Honestly, I have a daughter who's also a green building consultant, and I'm so proud that they're able to think so differently. Seeing a girl of 35, 40 trying to explain to developers, go green, it makes sense, it makes economic sense, and convincing them. I'm so proud that things is happening, and I'm so glad that this is being taken up in the BNCA forum. And Art and Skill is a great idea. Congratulations, and we're sure there to help you anytime you need anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. And it's really been great to hear from both of you and all our panelists, because like you said, we really rarely actually get a chance to really discuss all these issues in our day-to-day working environment. There's so much of syllabus to complete and so many other subjects to be completed, that we really don't get that space and the time to really sit down and talk about these things. But I think they're very important. That's it should be a trigger. So the whole purpose of this, I think, also is that it should kind of trigger, create awareness, and maybe take you on a very different path from what you are doing today. So thank you very much for the Art and Skills platform for, kind of creating this kind of a platform where these discussions can happen and such open discussions can happen. So thank you so much, and thank you again, Shroff sir and Karve ma'am. It's really been a pleasure listening to both of you. And thank you to all our panelists also.